The massacre that Rome tried to erase from memory still echoes like a cry, suffocated in time. Imagine a silent field covered with Roman bodies, banners lying on the ground soaked in blood. It was not a glorious victory. There was no triumphal parade. There was no music, only silence, shame, and defeat. Today, you will discover the history that Rome did not want you to know. If you think the Roman Empire was invincible, get ready. This episode will destroy that image. In the next few minutes, I will reveal how an entire legion was crushed by enemies that Rome considered insignificant, and how this massacre left such deep marks that even the senators preferred to bury it in oblivion. So, stay with me until the end, because when you know this episode, you will understand that the power of Rome had much deeper cracks than the official history usually tells. And if you love discovering hidden truths, forgotten secrets, and events that changed the course of history, subscribe now to the channel and activate the bell, because this journey will shake the way you see Rome forever. If this content has already piqued your curiosity in the first few minutes, imagine what's yet to come. So, be part of this community now. Leave your like to strengthen the channel and subscribe. This way, you guarantee access to stories that almost no one has the courage to tell. With each video, you'll discover secrets that Rome tried to hide from the world. Don't be left out, because knowledge like this is not just information, it's transformation. Rome has always been a propaganda machine. Each victory was extolled in triumphal arches, parades, and fiery speeches in the Senate. But behind the facade of absolute power, there were scars that the city chose to hide. Among them, this forgotten massacre. Imagine an empire accustomed to seeing its legions march undefeated, suddenly confronted with the harsh reality of defeat, not against a great king, not against a rival empire, but against peoples they called barbarians. The shame was so deep that the defeat was no longer counted, almost as if erasing the event could also erase the humiliation. It is in this contrast that the great truth lies. Rome was not invincible. And the silence that followed this massacre is as telling as any victory celebrated in its squares. The Romans looked at their opponents with arrogance. To them, they were just disorganized tribes, without military discipline, without technology, without the weight of glory that Rome carried. They were called barbarians, a term used not only to identify foreigners, but to diminish their humanity and strength. However, what the generals did not see was the cunning of these peoples. They knew every forest, every canyon, every hidden trail. They knew how to use the terrain to their advantage, and, above all, they had something that Rome no longer had: the fury of those who fought for survival. Underestimating them was the biggest mistake. What seemed like a simple campaign of domination turned into a bloody trap, revealing that even the savages could humiliate the largest army in the world. Rome believed that victory was already assured before the battle even began. The senators pressed for quick results, and the generals, overconfident, marched without measuring the risks. The legions advanced heavy, carrying too much pride and too little preparation. They did not bother to analyze the terrain, did not consider the weather conditions, and ignored the ambush signals. For them, facing barbarian tribes would be just another formality, something that would end with reports of triumph sent to the Senate and more glories carved into the marble. But pride blinds. The discipline that had so often been Rome's secret weapon turned into rigidity. The confidence which should inspire turned into recklessness. And in this excess of certainty, the Romans did not realize that they were walking straight to the mouth of the trap that would change everything. The Roman march seemed like a show of force, but it was actually a procession towards disaster. The legions advanced along narrow trails, surrounded by dense forests, where vision was limited and formations broke easily. The flooded, and uneven terrain slowed movement. The rain turned the soil to mud, and the soldiers carried excessive weight without enough food. Each step plunged them deeper into an invisible trap. Logistics, which had always been Roman pride, failed. Supply lines have stretched too far, making them vulnerable. The scouts ignored strange signals, hastily erased tracks, abnormal silence in the villages. It was as if the enemy had disappeared, but in fact, he was just waiting for the right moment. Rome marched, believing in victory, but everything around screamed that the tragedy was already written. The attack came like thunder. Suddenly, the trees turned into living walls of hidden enemies. Spears and arrows rained down from all sides, hitting legionnaires who could not even form the ranks. The chaos was immediate, screams of pain, officers falling first, banners falling to the muddy ground. The famous Roman discipline was lost in seconds, crushed by despair. The soldiers tried to raise shields, but the narrow terrain prevented them from maintaining formation. Many died without even seeing the enemy. What was an organized legion became a disoriented mass, caught between the weight of armor and fear. The centurion's orders were drowned in screams, and each new attack increased the sense of inevitable defeat. It was more than a battle. It was a massacre, designed to humiliate Rome in front of itself. When silence finally took over the forest, the scenery was indescribable. Roman bodies lay strewn on the muddy floor, mixed with pieces of broken armor and pierced shields. The red of the blood blended with the earth, turning the field into a makeshift cemetery. Banners, once symbols of honor and power, were fallen, some torn by enemies as trophies. The smell of death dominated the air, mixed with rain and smoke from still burning torches. For the barbarians, this was a day of victory. For Rome, it was the portrait of shame. Trained men for years, reduced to anonymous bodies, abandoned far from the walls they swore to protect. The field of the dead was not only the end of a battle, but material proof that Roman invincibility was just a myth. The news of the massacre reached Rome as an open wound. The Senate plunged into embarrassing silence. There were no inflammatory speeches, no statues to erect, only shame. The people, accustomed to celebrating victories with triumphal parades, were gripped by fear. If barbarians considered inferior were capable of annihilating an entire legion, what else could happen? Some called for immediate revenge, others demanded explanations. But all shared the same feeling. Rome's security had been shaken. Surviving generals bore the brunt of defeat, many preferring to remain silent rather than admit their mistakes. For the first time in a long time, Rome did not seem invincible. This collective silence was not just mourning, it was an attempt to hide a scar that compromised the image of the empire in the eyes of its own people. Rome knew how to manipulate memories. Victories were immortalized in triumphal arches, coins, and inscriptions. Defeats, on the other hand, when they could not be avenged, were pushed into oblivion. This massacre was treated as a stain unworthy of appearing in the official records. The Senate avoided mentioning him, the generals diverted the subject, and the chroniclers preferred to speak of future glories rather than present shame. Thus, little by little, the memory was buried, not under the earth of the battlefield, but under layers of silence and propaganda. Rome built its identity on the idea of absolute power, and to admit such a humiliating defeat would be like cracking the very foundations of the empire. The truth about this massacre, therefore, was not denied only by pain, it was erased as if it had never existed. The forgotten massacre is more than a military episode. It is a mirror of human frailty in the face of pride. Rome, which saw itself as the master of the world, discovered that even the greatest of empires could bleed, stumble, and feel shame. And perhaps that is why he tried to hide this story, because it reminded him that no earthly power is eternal. The victories lifted Rome, but it was the defeats that revealed its true face. Every body left in that field, every standard captured, every silence constrained in the Senate is a testimony that glory also has a shadow. For us, remembering this massacre is not just revisiting the past, but understanding that every empire, no matter how grandiose it seems, carries invisible cracks. And it is precisely in them that the truth that official history has tried so many times to silence is hidden. I have prepared this content with dedication to deliver to you a part of history that has been hidden for centuries. If this has already opened your eyes to a new vision of Rome, reciprocate now with a like and your subscription to the channel. This simple gesture strengthens this work and allows me to continue bringing truths that can transform the way you see the past and even how you understand the present.